Welcome, everyone. My name is Sheila Sutton, and I am with the Metropolitan Planning Council. Throughout the rest of this presentation, we're going to be saying MPC, it's Metropolitan Planning Council. Thank you for being here at the second event of this year's Drinking Water 1-2-3 Academy. Our sessions this year are living under a theme of shared solutions for a universal resource. And we are so fortunate to live in a region with a lot of fresh potable water. Anyone and everyone who calls our region home deserves access to clean, affordable drinking water. But like so many things in our region, access varies from community to community. Next slide, please. So it's our goal today to present a curriculum in which we talk about information sharing and coming together to solve problems. These problems include sustainable water supplies, building trust with constituents, lead service line replacement, and inequitable access. The goal here is to build an efficacy around these important issues in a community that can make a difference. Before we get started, we're going to jump into housekeeping. So first, please use the chat box for general conversation and remarks, and use the Q&A box for questions. We will have question and answer after each one of our panels today, and we'd love to get your questions into the Q&A box so we can answer them. If you need captioning today, please use the CC button. That's in the Zoom utility here in the Zoom app, and that will give you English captions. Finally, I will be putting water puns into this agenda throughout. I hope you enjoy it. We also have someone who let us know that the change of seasons is something that they love, and they look forward to solstice and when the days start getting longer. Okay, for those of you who aren't familiar with MPC, MPC is an independent planning organization working to address regional built environment issues through a racial and economic justice lens. Our goal is a thriving Chicago region for all of our residents. Simply put, we build equity into the built environment. The work we do is grounded in these three pillars: thriving communities, equitable infrastructure, and just public systems. And our work is, of course, intersectional across planning, development, sustainability, and other program areas. The water issues we'll be discussing today flow throughout all of these. See what I did there? As such, pipes and water delivery systems that help us get clean drinking water when we turn on our taps are in fact infrastructure, though often invisible to us. The maintenance of these pipes that lead to one of our region's most valuable resources, fresh potable water, and the ways in which we fund and distribute that resource is part of sustaining thriving communities. And because our water utilities in Illinois are by and large public, not to mention that water is literally life for us humans, the systems which we govern and support our water delivery systems with need us to be diligent in making sure that those waters are teeming with fairness, transparency, equity, and justice at every scale, municipal, regional, state, and beyond. If you're interested in learning more about what we do, you can do that by visiting metroplanning.org. The link is in the chat. Now then, since water is what brings us here today, let me fill your cup with a brief overview of our Drinking Water 1-2-3 initiative. So, starting in 2017, MPC released the Drinking Water 1-2-3 guide. This guide was aimed primarily at elected officials and municipal staff. We assume that most elected officials don't come into office with a background in water resource management. So we worked with experts in the field to provide an overview of our region's drinking water resources and the infrastructure required to deliver them, information on drinking water management and the relevant laws, and some other major issues like supply constraint, contamination, and aging infrastructure. Then the Go chapter explains what you should do with that information. You can read all about it at the link on the screen and also in the chat. That resource is free and online. So the Drinking Water Academy brings our Drinking Water 1-2-3 guide to life. In past years, we have held both in-person and virtual events around the region. with interactive educational events that engage timely topics with plain language information and resources. Today is session 2 of our Drinking Water 123 Academy. Today's sessions focus on winning strategies for creating sustainable drinking water solutions. Now, the final event of our series, session 3, Meeting Each Other and Meeting the Drinking Water Challenge, is an exclusive in-person collaboration and problem-solving session on December 7th. The session has limited capacity and is for municipal representatives. That's mayors, trustees, directors of public works, you get the idea, and the other key stakeholders to come together and solve problems and network and help us move forward in the region. So we have a very full agenda for today, and it is engaging. Our speakers will do deep dives into 2 major topics: collaborations, from small steps to big deals in water partnerships, and implementing best practices in lead service line replacement and communications. First, we'll have Jeannie Kruger of Arcadis, our presenting sponsor, give us an overview of the importance of building relationships of trust for drinking water delivery. And after that, Allison Swisher, Director of Public Works of Joliet, Mayor Matt Brawley of Montgomery, and Mayor Katrina Thompson of Broadview will discuss the process of how each of their municipalities work to partner across municipal boundaries to find solutions to secure safe and sustainable drinking water supplies for their community. And Mayor Thompson will give us an added bonus of her climate resiliency work and how that can impact partnerships in other sectors, such as drinking water delivery. In our second hour, we'll jump in the deep end of the pool with those working on the ground for the implementation of lead service line replacement and best practices for communicating with constituents for success. Our panelists this session will be Rachel Burchett of Elevate as moderator, Dante Sawyer, village manager of Hazelcrest, Chris Tiongson, research associate with MPC, and Jonathan Flowers of Robinson Engineering, and Russ Rietveld of the village of Skokie. We hope that you will swim with ease through our 2 hours of engaging conversations. Don't forget to add any questions to the Q&A box in Zoom, and we will call out those questions during our Q&A poll. And we will call out those questions during our Q&A section. So we're going to launch a poll right now, and this poll will set the stage for much of our event. Please see the poll on your screen and respond. So about this poll, communication is a crucial building block for engaging constituents for everything from water infrastructure upgrades, billing and water rates, and for all of us to be able to row our boats together to arrive at the safe shore of affordable, clean drinking water for our communities. So how do you get that information? Or if you're in charge of a municipal water system, how do you send that information? Hopefully we all learn that the simple act of turning on a faucet and getting clean drinking water is only made possible if we learn how to communicate the importance of this process to our end users and build trust before a crisis happens. So in our poll, we have 75% of participants saying that they get their water news from, it's still up in the lead. We've got reading notices and flyers, including in the water bill, community meetings, educational events, and social media. Local news and radio are at 14%, but the big ones are community meetings and educational events. That's really important information about in person. And so now I'm going to turn this over to Jeannie Kruger, Vice President and Chicago Area Manager for Arcadis. Thank you, Jeannie.
Good morning. So last session, we heard that there's help on the way for lead service line replacement in the form of funding and educational programs. Now, I've really been looking forward to today, hearing from some of the folks that have been in the trenches and they've been there and done that and forged the way. So lead service line replacement takes all the complication of a large construction program and adds the challenge of addressing the private side of the lines. You're entering residents' homes and no one takes that lightly. If you're like me, my home is my castle, my sanctuary. You want to drill into my foundation? I'm not sure. Are you sending your best? Have you done this before? Will you put it back? I'm sure that you don't have any trouble imagining the questions that residents are asking, knowing that knowing that this is important to their health and well-being. Relationships of trust are crucial in our programs. Carefully planning, outreach, education, relationship building, and empathy are so important. With funding at unprecedented levels, there has never been a better time to invest in our own communities. Designing an outreach program takes more than just coming in, replacing lines, and leaving, especially in the historically underserved communities. As citizens ourselves, why would we not take an opportunity to bolster our community? My goal is to leave things not the same as I found them, but better. That means staying flexible and incorporating continuous learning from work completed. Why not consider working with the contractors on local workforce development or marrying lead line replacement with other capital improvements? We need to think outside the box. So the American Water Works Association published the Lead Communications Guide and Toolkit in 2022, and it is filled with great advice, lessons learned, case studies from communities that have already tackled these important issues. And some of the things that really stood out to me were really staying on top, communicating internally first, creating an action plan, being prepared, being the first out of the gate with any messages, staying consistent with your messages and actions, partnering with marketing, community organizations, clients, partners, building those relationships. Again, telling your story first. Don't let the media pressure you into it or tell it incorrectly at first, because we know that first impressions stick. Focus on your solutions and don't let it get you off track. Communicate with empathy and really listen. Be sincere and no empty promises. And again, this is a big one for me. Speak in layman's terms. So Arcadis is so pleased to be able to sponsor Metropolitan Planning Council's Drinking Water 123 Academy event. We're currently working with Cook County's Bureau of Asset Management in their Build Up Cook program to provide funding assistance and technical expertise in water, stormwater, and the elimination of lead service lines from 26 communities to start. Enjoy your sessions, and now I'll hand the show back to Sheila.
Thank you, Jeannie. I have one quick question for you, which is, do you work with folks outside of Cook County?
I do. I absolutely do. I am currently the project manager on Build Up Cook, but I also have several other clients where I am offering assistance. I am a national funding expert for Arcadis, and I also am a program manager of very large projects. So yes, we absolutely will. I'm happy to offer any assistance that I can. Please feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much. As Jeannie has stated, it is so critical for water utilities and municipal leaders to create and sustain relationships of trust to get the work of delivering safe, clean, and affordable drinking water to constituents, to get that work done. So the next two panels will focus on issues of trust and how those are fundamental to creating success in our water delivery systems. Our next panel is a deep dive on municipal collaborations, focusing on communities who have worked to build relationships of trust in order to solve sustainability issues in drinking water supply and climate resilience. So, without further ado, we will have on this panel Allison Swisher, who's Director of Public Utilities for the City of Joliet, Mayor Matt Brawley, Village President for the Village of Montgomery, and Mayor Katrina Thompson, who is the Mayor of Broadview and is also Director of the Broadview Westchester Joint Water Utility. Each one of them will help you understand how municipal leaders are utilizing collaborative processes and water system partnerships to address water sector challenges. And Mayor Katrina brings not just her water expertise, but also we'll be talking about her work with C4, and we'll hear more about them later in terms of cross-municipal collaboration for climate resilience challenges. To learn more about today's speakers, please see our chat. We'll start with hearing from Allison Swisher about how the Grand Prairie Commission, through a collaborative process, helped Joliet and other municipalities secure access to a new plan for sustainable water supply. Good morning, Allison. Please introduce the audience to your collaborative work with the Grand Prairie Commission.
Great, thank you, Sheila. Thank you everyone for being here today. Again, my name is Allison Swisher. I'm the Director of Public Utilities for the City of Joliet, and I'm glad to be here today to introduce the Grand Prairie Water Commission to you. If you've not heard of the Grand Prairie Water Commission, it's a new commission that is forming in the southwest suburbs. And I think you might be asking why we need a new water commission in an area where it seems that water is very abundant, but actually regionally in the southwest suburbs, which currently relies on groundwater for our wells, there is issues both with water quantity and water quality. We have our deep sandstone aquifer is being pumped to the point that there's not being recharged in a manner that can sustain the demand. And also there's quality issues with the shallow wells due to increasing chlorides in the presence of PFAS. Next slide, please. So specifically in Joliet, that meant that based on the studies completed by the Illinois State Water Survey, we would not be able to meet our maximum day demands by 2030. And that was very alarming for everyone in Joliet. So our former mayor, Bob Odenkirk, directed staff to proceed with a study to evaluate all possible alternatives. We really wanted to look at every option and not leave any stone unturned. So we looked at 14 water sources initially in a phase 1 study, and then moved 5 of those sources into a phase 2 study, ultimately having 2 options of Lake Michigan water that were further evaluated in 2020. Next slide, please. All along, we knew that in Joliet that this was not just an issue for Joliet and that we needed to be considering a regional solution. So throughout all of the studies I just mentioned, we were always looking at demand scenarios that included a regional option. We did also, throughout the process of those studies, reach out to communities, neighboring communities, to get their input. And also formed a water planning group to fund additional modeling that the Illinois State Water Survey completed to evaluate the deep and shallow aquifers in our region. So in all, we solicited and received input from over 12 communities prior to the Joliet City Council ultimately selecting to purchase water from the city of Chicago as the alternative water source. Next slide, please. So after the city council made that decision to proceed with working with Chicago, we were tasked then with officially seeking partners to form a water commission. And the benefits, I think, are fairly obvious, but just to reiterate, the more people working together through economies of scale, we can have lower water rates, we can distribute the risk amongst entities, and there's a lot of support from state and federal agencies for regional projects. In addition, the commission structure allows for access to construction rights of ways outside of our member communities that would not be allowed for just a single community. Next slide, please. So after about a year of seeking further input and meeting with more communities, we had 6 communities that executed a preliminary agreement to form the Grand Prairie Water Commission. That was done in February of 2022. We do anticipate formal formation to occur early next year. So the 6 communities that are working together on this project are Channahon, Crest Hill, Joliet, Minooka, Romeoville, and Shorewood. So overall, that's about a population of about 300,000 people. Okay, next slide, please. And we were very excited. Last August, we did a press release to announce that we were going to proceed with the Grand Prairie Water Commission. We established a website at gpwc-il.org, and ever since then have been moving forward with everything necessary to make this project happen. Next slide, please. So, one of the biggest questions was, how was the commission going to be structured? And as the slide shows, we have the 6 communities that will make up the Grand Prairie Water Commission will be purchasing water from the commission, and the commission will purchase water from the city of Chicago. While the project is being constructed, Joliet will act as the program manager. And one very critical component is that the Water Commission is governed by a board of commissioners, which each member community has an elected official who acts as a commissioner, and each commissioner has one equal vote. Next slide, please. So what is this major undertaking? It's a $1.446 billion program, definitely the largest project that any of our communities have ever undertaken. Over 65 miles of transmission main to get all the way from Chicago all the way out to our furthest point in Shanahan. Half of that is large diameter, 60 to 66 inch. We have 3 pumping stations and 2 standpipes. So definitely a lot of work that needs to happen between now and 2030. Next slide, please. So that just concludes my opening remarks. It's a very exciting project and very excited to be working together with our neighboring communities. If you want more information, please definitely visit our website at gpwc-il.org. Thanks, Sheila. Back to you.
Thank you, Allison. And that link will be in the chat for folks. So feel free to look at that link at your time when you have time. This is an amazing amount of work, and it's tremendous that you were able, Joliet and its neighboring communities were able to come together. We're going to move to Mayor Katrina Thompson now, who will discuss the Cross-Community Climate Collaboration, or C4, and how that group is meeting to meet challenges in terms of climate resiliency across communities. So Mayor Thompson, I know that aside from being mayor of Broadview, you're also an agency director of the Broadview Westchester Joint Water Agency. We know you have a history of working with your fellow municipalities. Tell us more about your work today.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me this morning. So the cross-community collaboration is a collaboration of 14 municipalities. And so I got started in this space of work because I had a cousin that died at the age of 10 of asthma. And I wanted to dive deep more into what we could do to preserve life of all ages, not just because my cousin passed away, but it was an unfortunate, untimely time of death. I decided to do collaboration work because one thing that we know for sure is we get all of these unfunded mandates by the state or federal government, and it's important that we collaborate so that we can do more. So I want to talk more about it, but I want to show you a video first so that you can understand how we got started. And the partners are Vicki Skaman, the Village of Oak Park, and the village president of the Village of River Forest.
Our project is called C4, Cross Community Climate Collaborative. The concept was birthed out of a relationship that I have with our village president in River Forest, Kathy Adusi, and Mayor Katrina Thompson of Broadview.
And the hope was, if we as mayors take a leadership role in bringing other mayors together to address climate change, then I think we can actually find solutions, not only individually, but collectively here in our own region.
Sector meetings.
We meet as an executive team every month with the partners that we have on our leadership board. And we are planning and strategically working with the other municipalities to keep them on task so that we meet all of our benchmarks, all of our goals and objectives, whether it's renewable energy, whether it's healthy homes to protect children with asthma, or EV charging stations. C4 has tapped into Darnell Johnson and Gary Cunin. They are expert advisors on what direction we need to take for C4.
There really is a sense of urgency with this issue of climate, and also a huge issue around equity.
These communities that we're focusing on, they create a very diverse picture. We're looking at Black, brown, and white communities that have traditionally done things in silos, right? Not my problem, not my priority. Now we're at a place where they're understanding, no, it is our problem and it should be our priority.
Many of these communities have fewer resources. They don't have the staffing capacity to hire a sustainability coordinator or somebody to go after grants. So C4 is really intending to help support these communities at major projects.
It's going to take time, but we have to be intentional with the messaging and how we educate so people know how important it is. Listen, I'm talking about it every single day.
we just don't want to miss out
I'm
on
very
that
excited and
opportunity to
grateful to be
succeed.
receiving this award from the American Beverage Foundation for a Healthy America and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. This grant is going to allow us to engage more communities in working together to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Otherwise, really great meeting, everybody. Send out the invitation.
We believe that this is a great start to hopefully what will be a very large impact to our communities.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Katrina, for sharing that information with us. And that's a great video that we were able to repurpose for this event. So we're gonna move on to hear a little bit from Mayor Matt Brawley about his collaborative process. And then we're gonna come back to everybody and we're gonna ask some questions so we can all learn how these community leaders have impacted collaboration in their communities. So Mayor Brawley, if you could help us understand more about the Kendall County Drinking Water Collaboration, we'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me today, Sheila. My name is Matt Brawley. I'm the mayor of Montgomery. I'm also a civil engineer. I've been serving in this capacity for about 10 years. The problem that we have is not unique, as you're hearing from other municipalities today. Our village of 25,000 water users is all served by deep wells, and over the past few decades, our water levels are depleting in the aquifer. And so, I know that it's not unique. It's a problem that our neighboring communities of Oswego, Yorkville, and as you can see, the folks in the Joliet area as well, are also facing. So water supply planning has been an ongoing effort in Montgomery for the better part of 10 years. And we've identified or reviewed multiple different water sources that we could utilize in Montgomery. It wasn't quite as many as Joliet, but they were one of the options that we looked at, including the Fox River and then various connections into Lake Michigan. But really what helped us in this was we knew we couldn't do it alone. We had existing strong relationships, which you'll hear me go back to several times today, with our neighboring communities. We're all part of the same Council of Government, Metro West, that really has fostered that collaboration and coordination amongst our communities. It goes far beyond what we're able to solve here with water, but this is by far the biggest challenge that we've undertaken. So the studies that have happened in Joliet really allowed us to fine tune our modeling with the new information from the Illinois State Water Survey. So we did identify more than 6 alternatives for water, and ultimately the 3 communities, which we refer to as WaterLink, selected Lake Michigan Water via the DuPage Water Commission, and we're negotiating on contracts for all that stuff now. And that's the intro there, and I have more to come. Thanks, Sheila.
Thank you, Mayor Brawley. That's actually really informative, and I think it's really important that we have heard from Allison Swisher talking about a similar issue in their community, right? So we both have a plethora of water, and we also have systems that we thought were going to last forever, like our wells and our aquifers, that we're learning that there are challenges, and these challenges are here now, and we have to face them. So this is exciting. I'm going to ask you each to tell us more about your collaborative process. So I'm going to start with Allison. I'm going to ask everyone the same question, but can you talk about any of the challenges that arose in your partnerships and how you solved them?
Sure. First I want to say that, we don't know all the problems with how we've been working together. It's been a really great collaborative experience, but there are differences between the communities that needed to be addressed when we were working on what kind of the key principles were going to be regarding how our commission would operate. And really the first one was just the difference in size of our communities. Joliet is a large community, over 150,000 people. We have smaller communities, who are more in the, less than 10,000 people. So when trying to establish the structure for the commission, there were different scenarios presented whereby perhaps there should be a weighted vote based on the amount of water you're purchasing. But we realized really quickly on that was going to be kind of a non-starter. Everyone felt like if they were going to be participating, they wanted to have equal representation and equal voting power. So that's where, as I said previously, it was decided very early on that there would be, one commissioner per community and they would have one equal vote. Another issue was kind of the differing level of urgencies. The Illinois State Water Survey provided groundwater modeling for each community. And, Joliet was, got the feedback that we were going to need a new water source by 2030, but other communities had maybe until 2050 until they would see that their aquifer would be in their region would be depleted. So it was very important for Joliet that we have a timeline for the program that would meet our needs, which is, one of the solutions was having Joliet act as the program manager. So we still retain control over being able to deliver the project by that 2030 deadline, which is so critical for our community. Really the last, item was just really the trust and collaboration that you needed to, work on such a large and costly project. And as Mayor Brawley mentioned, we really leaned on our existing COG, the Will County Governmental League. All of our communities are, active members in that group and have a history of working together on regional issues. So we were really able to coordinate with the executive director, Hugh O'Hara, to kind of act as a, intermediary between the communities to really facilitate, positive discussions to iron out some of the matters that did arise. So that those are kind of a sampling of some of the issues that we've addressed and how we've been able to positively address them.
Allison, thank you. Those are real challenges, on the ground challenges, right, that people have to face. And so it sounds like people came to the table with the spirit of trying to find solutions, and that's really key. Mayor Brawley, could you talk to us about challenges that arose in your partnerships and how you solved them?
Yeah, absolutely. So the quick one that comes to mind is the future planning area for all of our communities. Montgomery is largely built out. We don't have a lot of room to expand, while like Yorkville has a massive planning area. So that kind of factors into some of the future costs and how we would split those up. It really helped. I didn't touch on this at the beginning, that there was support, and there is support for this at all levels of our local governments, right? Our managers, our public works directors, our boards, and keeping all of them, especially the board, informed as to what you're going to do, and really just a shared goal in this. So really our big issue is just how to split up costs as things move along, which, I'm happy to say that it's a good collaboration amongst the three. With collaboration, you don't always have the same exact goals, and the expenses that we have to stomach here. But at the end of the day, it's going to be an agreement that I think benefits, not only our town, but all three of the communities.
Awesome. Yeah, and again, I'm so excited to hear that. So Mayor Thompson, I'm going to pass it on to you for the same question. Can you talk about any of the challenges that have arisen in the partnerships through C4 or the Westchester Broadview utility, and how you've addressed them, and specifically maybe talk a little bit about the focus of equity for C4?
Okay, so for me, I don't look at challenges as a problem. I look at the opportunity that it presents itself. So we have created a space where we created opportunities for others to participate in. I do chair the Broadview Westchester Joint Water Agency with Mayor Greg Riegel from the village of Westchester. And so that's been in existence for probably almost 50 years now. And so I inherit that, but we still continue a good, healthy relationship because we do have water customers that we have to supply water to. And that's to the village of Westchester, the village of Broadview, Loyola Hospital, Hines, and the VA. And so we are intentional with the decisions that we have to make as it relates on the water agency side. As it relates to collaborations with C4, we were able to get 14 municipalities to sign an MOU to say that they want to participate in how we look at climate climate resilience and how we look at the future of what we need to do to move in the right direction. And so it was a buy-in. It wasn't a problem that we saw. Now, some concerns that we do have, like the municipalities that are partners with us, like the Village of Oak Park, the Village of River Forest, they've been in this space of work for over 25 years. So when you talk about the Black and brown community trying to get abreast and get on board with all of these changes that's taking place, sometimes, we look at it as we can't do it, but we can do it with partnerships and collaborations, because a lot of us small communities, we don't have sustainability coordinators. And so a lot of time it's the staff doing the heavy lifting and also learning something new. So we just continue to move forward and collaborate, and we have open dialogue. And the one thing that I do know that we have trust amongst the 14 municipalities, 14 mayors, and their staff working together to get the job done.
Thank you. That's so, I think the three of you speaking to this is so important because we're talking about different communities of different sizes with different kinds of populations, different resources, and also with different water systems and how you're coming, and how these challenges are being addressed. So my next question, and I'm going to start this question with Allison Swisher again. So could you talk to us a little bit about how the collaboration has impacted your communication with your constituents? And you can answer that as broadly as you would like.
Yeah, we, realized very early on that good communication was going to be very key to the success of the program. And with the commission now, there is an added layer of communication, because now we need to educate our residents not only about the need for a new water source, but also, that there will be a commission that will be formed that will also be an entity that they will, need to be aware of. So, really the most important thing has been to be extremely transparent. I'm very proud of the amount of transparency we've had throughout the entire process. Every report, every document, every presentation we've made is on our website. Joliet has a specific project website, Rethink Water, Joliet.org. And then also, as I mentioned, the commission has its own website. So now what we've really been trying to do is to coordinate those communication efforts so that we make sure that the messaging is consistent between the member communities as well as the commission. Most recently, we went through a budget update, and we were presenting the new budget information. And we really, really wanted to make sure that members of each community were hearing it at the same time, so that it wouldn't be perceived that, Joliet had the information earlier than, a resident in Channahon. So we had a very coordinated effort of public presentations to each board and council on that in order to try and, meet any concerns about that. We also have a lot of communication internally. Another important part of the communication strategy is just to make sure that we're being transparent with our member communities. So we have a technical advisory working group that's made up of public works directors from each community that meets twice a month. And then we have a mayors and managers group that meets once a month. So again, just really making sure that everyone is kept informed is going to be a really key to the success for the program. Within Joliet, as far as communicating to our residents, one of the major impacts of such a large program is the impact on rates. And so we've had to do a lot of work to kind of set the stage for the importance of this project. So we have a very robust system of social media posts, e-blasts, updates to our website, stakeholder meetings, and just a lot of public engagement focus on the project. One thing we have recognized is that the public really hasn't chosen to be very engaged, in the project. I do think after 5 years of talking about it, I think most residents in Joliet are aware that we are going to be switching to Lake Michigan water. And I do see, as we continue to raise rates, you might get more interest as, customers want to try and understand, why that is. And so we are definitely ramping that up, as we, move forward with, rate increases as they happen annually. Back to you, Sheila.
Thank you, Allison. And I also just want to point out that the communication piece it also takes work. Like that those are staff hours is what I'm hearing, to make sure that that happens. So that's another resource that you have to allocate while doing a resource allocation for water. Mayor Brawley, if you'd like to take on this question as well, how the collaboration has impacted the communication with your constituents.
Yeah, and I'm debating whether or not to say this, but I know that there's some percentage of Montgomery resident that probably thinks we're already on Lake Michigan drinking water. And it's probably the same down at Joliet. So there's re-education involved, but we have been talking about it a lot. And again, kind of to mimic Allison, I'm not sure that the public is entirely engaged currently. We do, make everything as transparent as we can. But I think, and I know that they will become more transparent. 2 years ago, we still did our water billing every other month. And, while we did get some pushback from the board, no other bill that I ever get only comes every other month. And as rates continue to raise over the next 10 years, we felt that it was in the best interest of the residents, also for water conservation, to switch that to a monthly billing, which was, again, like you said, Sheila, more labor intensive for our staff, but I think it is something that we needed to do. But as far as communication, I can vouch for the work that Joliet is doing. I follow along on all of their posts, and I'm on their mailing addresses. So it is a robust program. We've implemented our own WaterLink marketing campaign with, amongst the 3 communities to kind of spread that cost and time. But as we get closer to this date, I think we're going to even have to bump that up even more. The one thing I was going to say, we several years ago, we indexed our water rate increases, knowing that this was going to happen, that a big expensive project was on the horizon, so that you can kind of soften that blow, having more easier landing for our residents when roughly 10 years from now, we turn on the tap and we get Lake Michigan water.
Great. And Mayor Thompson, if you could take this question as well. And also if any connections between that, that you see through C4 that might actually apply to water work for Broadview in the future.
So everything that we do in transparency. And the big part of this is to make it work, is to educate. If we're not educating the public on the changes that's taking place, then you set yourself up for failure or the assumptions. And we don't want to do that. So we want to dispel all of the myths early on and just be transparent. So we have our website, all of our board meetings that we host, we stream them live. So those that don't have an opportunity to view them, they can go back and review them for information. Any presentations that we have, we make sure that we record those for, even for us to fact check sometimes, because sometimes we have conversations and with so much going on, we forget too. And so we have to know that as being a leader, we have to be the ones that check ourselves so that we can be transparent, so that we can have honest conversations, and so that we can be upfront with the constituents that have to buy into what we know, what they don't know. And sometimes that can be challenging. So I think just keeping your integrity in check and making sure that you're giving out the information, and don't be afraid to, get the hard question to answer it. Answer the question to the best of your ability with the facts, and you have great success. I mean, we just so brutally honest with everything. We have no secrets. It's not that we're trying to hinder anything, but we know we have to put best practices in place. We know we have to look at budgets that take place. We know that infrastructure is aging, so we know we have to put protocols and things in place. We all actively seek funding, and what C4 is really good at is collaborating with the funding. Like, we've gotten, probably since we've been in existence, almost $1 million in funding for 14 communities. So when we look at numbers, because the numbers is part of the data that we have to collect. And when we look at the numbers, we don't look at it like the village of Broadview with only 8,000 residents. We look at it 14 communities with over 100,000 residents. And that's just the residents. We're not talking about our business stakeholders that also play this role as water customers or climate change or EV charging stations or solar panel on their respective business. So we include them in our numbers as well, because we want them to participate, we want them to buy in, and we want them to be a part of the change. And the change is moving forward, and we have to be proactive with how we move forward together. We can no longer work in silos.
That's brilliant. So I would like to, I've invited people to put questions in the chat. I'm still inviting that. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions with our panelists here. So please add your questions to the chat now. And I'm going to go ahead and ask some questions that I had for our esteemed guests. And I'm going to ask first, Mayor Brawley, when I started this conversation at the top of the hour, I said most of us don't come in to, most elected officials don't come into office with a engineering background or a water resource management background, but that's not true for you. So in terms of your capacity to educate your fellow elected officials, how have you been able to use your engineering knowledge to translate information about drinking water needs to your fellow electeds in partnership and your constituents as well? Like translating
Sure.
all that to layman's terms.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd probably consider that the number one job of mine, honestly, is to translate the important information that we get from our advisors, staff and our consultants, who the board very much trusts. They trust the work that they're doing. I think that's kind of an important aspect of this. Even the folks that we've hired to study this on the private side work in our community. They live in our community. They're dedicated to our solution here. But reinforcing, I guess you'd say, in a less technical way, what is important to each village board member. I have a 7-member council, so there's 6 individuals that I do have to chat with. I think it's important that they see the technical aspect of it, the technical presentation, but then followed up with conversations that are higher level. I'm constantly pressing our board, to get up to a high level to think about 100 years from now. And I've said this every time we have to take a vote on this. It's the single most important project that any of us will ever work on in elected office. And so, yeah, that's how I translate that. Sometimes I think engineers are a little bit too technical for these positions, but I think it can provide an excellent benefit on something like this.
Great. And I'm going to, oh good, we do have a couple of questions in the chat. So the first question we have is, can you share your thoughts about public benefits relative to the use of Lake Michigan water from Chicago? And there's some more comment here. I understand your region agreed to an initial public benefit agreement with Chicago and the 18th Ward. I'm assuming, I'm not sure who this question is actually directed towards.
I can answer that question. So yes, I mean, the use of Lake Michigan water is something that, all of our communities are extremely committed to the conservation of lake water. We know it's one of our greatest resources here in the Midwest. So we, do take it very seriously, and we're all spending a lot of, significant funds to reduce non-revenue water so that water, isn't being wasted. As far as impacts to communities, we have done a lot of work in the 18th Ward, which is where 2 of the pumping stations will be constructed. And what we don't have a formal benefit agreement, but what we did negotiate with the Park District, where one of the pumping stations will be located, is a cash contribution to the Park District so that they could utilize those funds to do improvements to parks in the area. So that was, one of the ways that we are trying to show some benefit to the neighborhood in Chicago, where, those residents will be impacted by that construction. Broadly speaking, the city of Chicago and its residents, the Grand Prairie Water Commission will be purchasing water at a cost of over $30 million annually. And so that income that they recognize will allow them to maintain, lower rates, in Chicago for residents, because they do have that existing capacity available in their system. So I know that's a difficult benefit to explain to a resident who lives adjacent to a construction project, but broadly speaking, that is a benefit not only for Joliet, but also of the Kendall County communities, that we are all working together on a regional water system working with Chicago and the other water commissions that, use that water supply.
So I'm going to ask one last question from the audience, and then just going to get a final word from Mayor Thompson, because then everyone will have had a chance to respond. I think this question is really related between Allison Swisher and Mayor Matt Brawley. Has there been pushback from the international community regarding access to Lake Michigan water? Has that community been a part of your collaborations? And also in communicating the intention to tap Lake Michigan, is conservation a part of that conversation?
The international community, the Great Lakes Compact, which involves the Canadian provinces, there has, I think, been interest. I wouldn't say there's been pushback. We are able to utilize the lake water through, the allocation that Illinois does have. And so we are well within that allocation that the state has, and that is something that all of the, states and provinces that border the Great Lakes have agreed to. And, we are, as I mentioned earlier, take it very seriously about water conservation. And, as part of our allocation with IDNR, we had to commit to reducing non-revenue water conservation measures. And, we in Joliet are promoting water conservation significantly, mostly also not just because it's good to conserve Lake Michigan water, but also because it can help control a resident's rate or water bill, and can be used as an affordability measure also.
Mayor Brawley, did you have anything to contribute to that question?
No, I mean, nothing has risen really to my knowledge on the international. As I think everybody on this call knows, IDNR regulates the withdrawals, and all of us have to go down to the IDNR for a permit, which I know a bunch of people are in the process of doing. But water conservation, reducing our water loss, is something that is required by the IDNR. So in Montgomery, we've agreed to replace upwards of $100 million of existing water main in an unincorporated portion of the town that we serve water to, which is a huge undertaking. But that area is prone to significant leaks. And when you're pumping water from the aquifer, your cost of water loss there was much less than it's going to be. And it was really I told the board it was really a deferred maintenance obligation that we've been putting off for the last 50 years. So again, kind of translating that. So thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and give the last word to Mayor Thompson. Is there anything that you would like to share with this community about your expansive work, and just maybe one or two sentences, both with C4 and I think your story is interesting because you came into, I've heard some of your other conversations, that you did not come into office with that water resources management background. And so maybe that's a good place to start.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, MPC, for hosting this. This was a robust conversation, and I think it's important that more people participate. So yes, when I first got elected in 2017, I didn't know that I had to chair the Broadview Westchester Joint Water Agency. So it was a lot of technical things that I needed to learn so that I can make better and informed decisions. We have our engineers that work closely with our superintendent, and I think they do a really good job of articulating those things. But sometimes engineers can talk at high level conversation where the average person just don't understand the term. I do want to say that, as we work with C4 and as we collaborate with more communities, just keep in mind that, you can't see the air that you breathe. So the air that you breathe, it goes cross community. And that's why it's so important to collaborate, to not work in silos, but work together in partnerships and collaboration. So again, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak to your audience this morning. Back to you, Sheila.
Well, I am grateful to all of our panelists today. You really highlighted these needs, and I think water and air actually have a parallel because we don't see those pipes every day, and we know that there's a problem when there's a problem. And that's not the time to communicate, right? We're behind the curve, we're communicating at that level. So I appreciate your time today. We're going to take a quick break, just a few minutes. And so we were going to do a poll, but we're going to move it forward. So we've got 2 minutes, and we'll leave the poll there. You can answer the poll. The question is, have you had your water tested for lead? We'll do that for 2 minutes. Also, you can go get a drink of water from that you actually get out of your tap for a lot of folks, which is something we have in this country that a lot of places do not have still. We'll be right back at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, sorry. Well, hi folks, we're coming back online and I see most people have answered the poll. So we might have a skewed audience here. The question is, have you had your water tested for lead? 71% of people on this call said yes, which is pretty incredible. So I'm just going to share these results. We have 3 people who said, no, I don't need to. We have one person who said, no, I don't want to. And then no one said, I don't know how. Full disclosure, I actually have a kit sitting on my kitchen counter from the city of Chicago, waiting for me to test my water for lead. So here we are. And that's a really good introduction to the conversations of what does it mean to get those tests? What do we tell our constituents when we are asking them to test for lead, or we're asking them to participate in these lead service line replacement programs? And how do we make sure that people understand the urgency, but not have fear of drinking their water at the same time? So I'm going to pass this portion of the program to Rachel Burchett from Elevate, and she will moderate our panel of experts with real experience to help steer our ship in the right direction when it comes to lead service line conversations. Rachel, passing it to you.
Thanks, Sheila. My name is Rachel Burchett. I'm a senior project manager at Elevate, working on water programs. And we are going to talk about effective lead service line replacement, communications, and outreach. Next slide. So I'm going to give a quick overview of some of the work that Elevate has done over the past year, and then we'll talk to our wonderful panel about their experiences and have time for questions. So in the near future, we'll be publishing a report on effective lead service line replacement, communications, and outreach. Last summer, we spoke with staff, elected officials, and consultants from municipalities nationwide where these programs are already underway to learn what's worked well and what hasn't. Next slide. Because in the modern era, we know that with rising costs and water infrastructure reaching the end of its usable life and concerns about drinking water quality frequently entering public discourse, drinking water utilities are finding that they need a mindset shift around communications. Instead of their only interactions with residents being in a moment of crisis, utilities need in-house communication experts who can proactively engage with their community. And like we've been talking about this morning, fostering partnerships that help fulfill their formational purpose to protect public health through the provision of clean, safe drinking water. Next slide. From our interviews, we compiled a list of key takeaways that might benefit anyone reaching out to residents before, during, and after lead service line replacements. So I'm going to go through those. The first is, like Sheila just alluded to, communicating a sense of urgency, but not emergency. Nearly every municipality we spoke with shared about this challenge of making sure residents are concerned enough about lead in their water to do something about it, while also not creating a sense of panic in the community. Through lead testing and filter programs, communities can work to foster a healthy level of concern so that residents take steps to mitigate their risk for lead exposure while they're waiting for their lead service line to be replaced, and grant access when the time comes. Next slide. The next was to center the customer in your communications. In some cases, it's not just reaching the resident with information, but reaching them with a message that resonates. A top concern of many residents is what's going to happen to their property. And for them, utilities could show photos of another resident's yard after replacement, and even during replacement, to give them a picture of what that would look like and the restoration work that's involved. Another common thing that we heard is that utilities are finding people are saying, I've lived here my whole life, drank the water for decades, and I'm fine. So why should I need to do this enormous project? And for them, we heard some really unique outreach methods from some municipalities focusing on a message of economic value, like we should take advantage of public funding while this is available, because it might be required in the future and this funding might not be there then. So now is the time to do it. The next is to diversify communication channels. From phone calls and texts, emails, social media ads, flyers, LED construction signs, door hangers, and door knockers, utilities seem to have tried just about every tool in the toolbox to reach residents about lead service line replacement programs, and it's working. Those we spoke with found that it often takes 5 or more touch points to get residents on board, and some have even hired outside agencies or consultants to do this outreach well in advance. And as you can see on this list, this is just a handful of outreach strategies that some utilities got really creative taking advantage of. Next. The next big piece that we've kind of already talked about here today is building community trust. Some communities are finding that because the water utility is part of a municipal government, they must battle against a baseline level of distrust in their programs from the very beginning. We heard in countless ways that this played out in municipalities across the US, and across the board, they said one of the most effective ways to fight distrust is through word of mouth communication from resident to resident. We love this example of a yard sign that DC used for residents to communicate to each other. And block by block approaches can hugely benefit from a tool like this because they build a sense of urgency within a neighborhood and almost create a sense of positive peer pressure, where those who are previously resistant to signing up start to see community buy-in from their neighbors' signs. And this is kind of my favorite example. Being visible beyond times of crisis. So the reliability and accessibility of public water supply in the US means that most people don't give as much thought to their water supply or utility unless they have a problem. I came across this short quote that I think highlights this idea really effectively. Though impressive, the viaducts that brought water to ancient Rome were outside the city, largely out of public view. Rome's leaders built ornate fountains in public squares to make water supply, investment, and engineering marvel visible to the public, a poignant visual reminder of the state's engineering accomplishments. And I love this example because while ornate fountains are no longer the most effective way to build public support for investing in water infrastructure, maybe unfortunately, utilities and policymakers would be well served to experiment with novel ways of communicating the vast infrastructure and financial resources required to provide high quality municipal water and sanitation services to the public. Next. The next key takeaway was, can we go back one more? Sorry. Make it personal, go door to door. So this is really hands-on, but one of the most effective outreach strategies a lot of municipalities spoke to us about was just going door to door and answering questions. The village of Norridge, Illinois sent public works staffs to homes with known lead service lines and brought a piece of lead pipe and were able to answer questions about the upcoming lead service line replacement program, whether the water is safe to drink. And while this does sound like a lot of work, they viewed it as an investment in good public relations and were also able to get some other work done in those home assessments while they were doing these door-to-door visits for their lead service line replacement program. The next is to keep it simple. Large municipalities may have their work cut out for them when it comes to outreach, simply due to the number of lead service lines in their community, but they also tend to be the utilities who can afford reach to consultants or agencies. But smaller communities, while they might have less outreach to do, they're often doing it all in-house with existing staff. In Edgerton, grant funding for their lead service line inventory work generated a lot of press, and residents were encouraged to sign up for an inspection through Calendly, a free online scheduling tool. Nearly 1,000 people signed up, and the public works director visited each home personally, going door to door to make sure that they had a lead service line and do some other basic assessments. At the residence, the director filled out a mobile-friendly Google form that was able to go straight to contractors that had all the information that they needed to get started doing the work. We just love this really creative example of how using low-cost, free tools could still be an extremely effective project management tool. Whether it's finding the right person or just someone skilled at one-to-one outreach, that one guy in public works that's been around forever, utilities should take a thoughtful approach to who interacts with residents on their behalf. Depending on who shows up at their door, residents could have vastly different responses to the same basic request. Contractors might come across like they're trying to sell something. Government officials might be intimidating. Engineers might struggle to help the resident understand without acronyms and jargon what's going on. And so what utilities need is someone with experience in that one-to-one setting who can help answer questions and put residents' minds at ease. The next is pretty straightforward, but just involving residents in the process from planning to restoration. They want to know what's going to happen to their grandma's rose bush. They want to know what's going to happen to the mature trees in their yard, and having them be involved in the process is a really helpful tool. Next. And the last takeaway that we'll touch base on is just knowing that despite all of this outreach, some residents might still not choose to participate in programs. And so we might want to consider ordinances or other legal tools. They're not without pushback, but in most places that we spoke with, the ordinances and resolutions that they were able to pass with less noise and less difficulty than they were expected to. So that's an overview of our research. Now I'm going to invite you to hear from some of our amazing panelists and how they saw some of these topics play out in their work. Our first panelist is Dante Sawyer, Village Manager for Hazel Crest. Dante, to set the stage for our conversation, can you share a little bit about how Hazel Crest got ready for your lead service line replacement program and give us an overview of what your work has looked like?
Yes, well, good morning, almost afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Rachel, for this opportunity, Sheila and MPC, to share about what we did here in the village of Hazel Crest. So the village of Hazel Crest is in the process of actually starting to put shovels in the ground. Most recently, we had a community meeting to help bring the public awareness around what we're doing with the lead service line inventory and replacement project. Next slide, please. So, like most communities, our water comes out of Lake Michigan. Our water is routinely tested. We routinely test our water per EPA requirements. However, we still know that lead service lines do exist, and it's important to get them out of the ground. As stated here today, no amount of lead exposure is safe, and particularly children under the age of 6 are most negatively impacted. It can lead to negative cognitive effects on their physical development. Next slide. We started this work, I want to say maybe in 2019 through a technical assistance grant with the Metropolitan Planning Council to help us start to do a predictive analysis on where lead service lines were most likely located here in the village of Hazel Crest. With that technical assistance grant we received, we was able to go out and apply for funding from the state revolving fund to identify money to help get lead service line out of the ground. We was able to get a head start through this analysis with the Metropolitan Planning Council because we knew coming down the road, the state was going to make a requirement for communities to inventory and eventually remove lead service lines from the ground. Next slide, please. To help get the ball rolling, we wanted to get some synergy and consensus around this with our elected officials. So one of the first steps we did was to adopt a resolution calling for steps to address the remediation of lead service lines throughout the community. Of course, that resolution was adopted unanimously by our Board of Trustees. Next slide, please. This gives you a little example of the service line predictive inventory that we had completed with the assistance of the Center of Neighborhood Technology. They took a look at some of our building department information, primarily along the ages of the houses here in the village of Hazel Crest, and were able to come up with this map that you see here, which kind of outlines where they are predicting the lead service lines are at here in the village of Hazel Crest. We have about roughly anywhere between 4,500 active service lines, and on this map, with green being least likely, having a lead service line, and red being where we are assuming the most likelihood of having a lead service line at that particular residency. Next ad. And then from there, once we did the predictive analysis, we worked with MPC to come up with an equitable plan for removing the lead service line by essentially cross-referencing that data with other census data that we had related to median income, as well as the number of children in a household. And you can see, compared to previous map, how that map lines up against that other data that we have. Next slide, please. So once that was done, we had a study that was put together. We was able to work with our consulting engineers, Robinson Engineers, to go out and then secure the funding to do year 1 and year 2 of our lead service line removal. We were successful in getting about $6.7 million through the state revolving fund to help fund the first 2 years of our lead service line removal. In addition, we are combining this with a water meter replacement program. So as we go into house to verify the actual material of the lead service line on a private side, if it's not a lead service line on a private side, we're going to go ahead and replace the resident water meter. If it is found out that the material on a private side is made of lead, then we're going to make note of that, change that line, then come back and replace the meter along with it. Most recently, we had our open house on October 14th, where I said we had roughly about 70 residents in the phase 1 area come out to get information about the program. It was quite a good, successful turnout. But now we're out going door to door to continue the verification process with door knockers and door hangers, again, asking for residents' cooperation, and then trying to help us, continue the verification part that we need to make this project a success. So the more input that we're able to get from residents, the more cooperation we have from community, the more success that we will have with this project. And going back to something that Rachel said earlier when we spoke about this with the community, one of the points that kind of resonated with them was that here was opportunity to get some free plumbing work done in their house. Free work is something that everyone looks forward to receiving. So to say that, hey, here's an opportunity to get some free plumbing work done in your house. And also to Rachel's point that she made earlier that, this is something where they may mandate people to get this done independent, and the resources might not be there to have it done at that later date. So to get this free plumbing work done, to continue to keep the value in your house was powerful talking points, and trying to persuade residents to be cooperative throughout this process. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Dante. Could you share maybe a little bit about what it looked like to galvanize support from the leadership within your community? You mentioned that that resolution passed unanimously, and I'd love to hear about getting the buy-in and support for that.
Yeah, it was something that the board was aware of. when we went out and applied for the technical assistance grant through the Metropolitan Planning Council, it required, intergovernmental agreement, a memorandum of understanding that our elected officials had to adopt. So they were aware of the process along each step of the way. And so keeping them informed and having open lines of communication with them about the project and the different steps that we're taking to get to remove the lead service line to protect the residents here in Hazel Crest was an important part of the conversation. So by time the point, so when we got to the point where it was time to take action on the resolution, it wasn't too steep of a hill to climb, because by that point we had many conversations with our elected officials about this project, about the direction the state was going about the project, and the benefit it would bring for the residents of Hazel Crest.
That's great. Yeah. Are there any other external resources that you were able to leverage to support these efforts? You mentioned the technical assistance grant. What are some of those other resources you'd want other people to know about when they're planning for this process?
Yeah, I would think communication is definitely important. Through another technical assistance grant, we was able to get individuals that will help us put together our talking points communication, and even a dashboard that we're looking to roll out to keep the visibility of this project in the front and center of our residents, so they can actually see on our website how we're progressing towards the goal. And I think you pointed out once again, a positive peer pressure. If we can start to actually see the numbers start to roll up, hey, we was able to identify this many lead service lines. We was able to remove this many lead service line out of people's homes. Maybe that would also motivate some of their neighbors and other constituents to want to get a part of what is a positive thing for our community.
Thank you. Looking forward to hearing more from you during the Q&A portion of the discussion. Thanks, Ante. We now have Chris Youngson of Metropolitan Planning Council and Jonathan Flowers from Robinson Engineering to talk about data-driven lead service line prioritization for vulnerable communities. To set the stage, one of the things that we talked about is that sense of urgency, but not emergency. We know no level of lead is safe. Everyone has been saying that. And we want residents to take mitigation seriously, but we also don't want to create a panic. Having a methodology to explain who, why, and when lead service line replacement funds are going to be spent can go a long way to create a sense of transparency and trust within a community. This tool that our great panelists are going to share with us is something that can help municipalities prioritize lead service line replacement projects based on the CDC Vulnerability Index. Chris, could you share a little bit more about the tool and how it helps to create this sense of transparency and trust between a municipality and residents?
Sure. Thanks, Rachel. Everyone, I'm Chris from MPC, here with Jonathan Flowers from Robinson Engineering. So I'll just start with a very brief overview of the methodology we had developed for LSLR using a vulnerability index, similar to CDC's social vulnerability, but slightly different. Next slide. So this methodology looks at census block groups, and this is really our way of splitting up a municipality into neighborhoods, right? So this methodology essentially is ranking and scoring these block groups against one another based on census data, right? So looking at income, poverty, percent of the population under the age of 6, right? So again, it's very similar to the social vulnerability index from CDC. We decided to add some weights to each of these variables, and we landed on putting extra weight on children under 6 and income. Next slide, please. So how is this vulnerability index calculated? For the sake of time, all you really need to know is you're collecting all the data from the census website, right? You take those raw values and then you turn them into a score or an index. And so the higher the score, the higher the vulnerability. Next slide, please. And so you map out those scores, so those vulnerability scores, and then you map out the lead service line data, which Robinson provided us, and you just put one map on top of each other, right? So if you look at this map, similar to Hazel Crest map that you just saw a while ago, right? So the dark green box represents high vulnerability block group, and the light green box represents a low vulnerability block group, right? And the lead data is sort of color coded based on the probability of lead. So red and orange parcels are known lead or extremely high likelihood of lead. And so the idea behind this methodology is really a municipality can sort of undertake or apply this methodology and look at this and go, okay, in year one, we want to replace all the homes in a high vulnerability block group, right? In year two, we can focus on a less vulnerability block group. And the last thing I'll just say is that if you look at the zoomed in section of the high vulnerability block group, is that there's also no stopping a municipality from further prioritizing within a block group, right? So if you see a high vulnerability block group and you see that there's entire streets or blocks that are entirely comprised of homes with lead or extremely high likelihood of lead, is that there's that sort of extra step of prioritization, which kind of speaks to how there's room for both equity and cost efficiencies in this methodology. And so with that, I'll kind of kick it off to Jonathan, who can talk more about the application and the use of this methodology.
Thank you very much, Chris. Chris has done a lot of legwork on this, and he's very good technically accessing data, and we're very appreciative for MPC and Chris's help. This is a final product of what a prioritization would look like for a larger community. So this is color-coded from purple to red. If you think about the rainbow, where purple would be the highest vulnerable census block groups, and then red is the least. So you can see with this community, there's 22 years to this. So the important part about this tool is that when you're talking to somebody and you say, you're going to have your service line replaced next year, and then the person next to them in a public meeting, you say, you're going to have your service line replaced in 22 years, that's a really hard conversation to have. But when you have the scientific data to back it up, and you have an agreed upon methodology, it makes that conversation a lot easier. And a visible map like this helps with that work too. So you can see the size of these groups. This community has a population of about 55,000 people. There's 22 census block groups. So I would say they average in size about 600 to 1,000 homes. If you can go advance the slide. This is the overlay of the census tracts. So you can see there's only about 10 census tracts in this community. And they vary in size and shape and things like that. But we wanted to show this methodology because the IEPA is currently relying on census tracts to do their scoring and funding. And we think that we need to break it down into a smaller level. The census tracts would encompass probably 3 to 4 years worth of work with a highly dense lead area. And so we really appreciate the census block group approach. You can advance the slide. So what Chris has done is he's created a spreadsheet that pulls census data that's publicly available. And the spreadsheet is set up and it will be made publicly available by MPC to use. And that's the infrastructure. So we're looking at that as the tool. And then you have all of the options that you can put into that spreadsheet. And so you can see on the bottom here, those are the accessories or the bits for the tool. So if you can hit advance the slide. Those were the categories that Chris looked at, and that was taken from the CDC's vulnerability index. There are multiple indexes that you can look at. There is environmental justice criteria, and there's a lot of technical assistance grant money available to help with this. So this is what we thought would be the most appropriate, but you can customize your spreadsheet and your maps to your solution for your community. So if you advance the slide again, these are some more criteria that were looked at, but were not incorporated into our model. And your community might have its own individual considerations. You know, some things that we looked at, if you look at the actual ones that were just added were, what is the percent of rental? What is the age? How many single parents? You know, things that would dictate how well a person can repay are not just encapsulated sometimes by 8 criteria or even by 16 or by 20. So I think it's dependent on the individual community to make that decision. If you can advance the slide again. So this work is for the people. You know, you're replacing individual homeowners' lines, and it's important to get feedback. So the plan, the lead service line replacement plans that are required by the law to be finalized in 2027, those require public feedback. So what we would recommend is that you start with a rubric that you can present and the people can understand. But at the end of the day, it's up to them to help guide the process in terms of what they find acceptable from year to year and how to prioritize within their community. That's all we had for this part of the presentation.
Thanks, Chris and Jonathan. Did some really, really cool, intriguing work that you guys are doing. And what fun, cool maps that you end up with at the end of the process. So yeah, again, thank you for sharing about that. Just a reminder, we're watching the Q&A box for audience questions, and we'll address those after our next speaker. So coming up, you still have a little bit more time, put some questions in there. And then next to share with us, we have Russ Reitfeld, Director of Engineering from the Village of Skokie, to tell us about some lessons learned as Skokie is implementing its lead service line replacement program. On a community level, we've seen a variety of approaches to ordinances and resolutions, with some municipalities preferring a message of trust and asking for customer buy-in, and others passing ordinances with some even with repercussions for non-compliance. Russ, could you share with us a little bit about what's going on in Skokie and the impact of the resolution that you guys have passed?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you, MPC and Elevate, for bringing us together. And thank you all for joining us today. As Rachel said, my name is Russ Reitfeld. I'm currently the Director of Engineering for the Village of Skokie. Like many other public water suppliers of our age in this area, we were tasked with navigating the unfunded state mandate. Previous slide, please. So we're currently working on finalizing our lead service inventory and our lead service replacement plan. However, we are still trying to do our water main replacement program. And so, as I imagine is very common, the water main project includes replacement of water services up to the B-box. And so now with the new state law that went into effect January of 22, that would mean replacing the private side lead as well. So we actually did not conduct a water main replacement in 2022 because we did not yet have an answer or a path forward for the required private side replacement. Backing up a little bit to our water system as a whole, it's estimated that we have over 11,000 lead services that will need to be replaced. And in looking to address that looming issue, staff and elected officials supported a cost-sharing approach. So in April 2023, we created our lead line replacement program. As I said, it's a cost-sharing approach, which currently caps the private side replacement cost at $3,000, with the village paying the balance. We offer affected residents a payment plan. So it's a low interest, it's a 1% interest repayment with 60 quarterly payments of just under $54. The program also established that we will use any grant, federal or state money obtained to subsidize costs for those most in need as allowed by the funding requirements. And we were already successful in obtaining $2 million through Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. So as you can see on our screen, and as I mentioned, we did not do a project in 2022. However, we began investigating the service materials we would encounter in 22. And so we started the process knowing that we would have over 140 lead or unknown services impacted by the project. The initial communication was a letter, did a follow-up letter that we actually had response rate higher than we anticipated, but as I'm sure everyone can appreciate, we still did not get 100% response. So after the initial letters, we started making phone calls that filled in some of the gap. And then from there, the next step was to go around and knock on the doors. As Rachel highlighted, utilizing multiple types of communication was key for us. We're very happy to report that at the end of the day, we ended up replacing 110 of 119 lead services. So that was over 92%. The remaining 9 was 4 waivers and 5 non-responsive. We were blown away by this. And so we had a water commission run a water transmission main through the village a couple years prior, before the Lead Line Replacement Act went into play. And we required that water commission to replace any lead services that they crossed in the right of way, but then also to offer private side replacement to the affected homeowners along the route. And that was free for those homeowners. And they only had 75% of the people impacted replacing their lead services. And so I think those statistics speak to our success and the success of the lead line replacement program. And even though we were not able to fully subsidize the cost for the private side replacement, with the cost sharing approach, we were still extremely successful. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, in 2022, we did not do our project, but prior to the 2023 project commencing, we had established the program, and it was very important to us that we gave the impacted residents enough time to digest and consider what essentially they're being thrust into, right? And so when we started our 2023 project, we provided 3 months of lead time between the initial letter. So this was for anybody that we still had not determined their service material with the 2022 work. And then we gave, as I said, 3-month lead time in determining the remaining service material types that we had still not known. And then at this time, the additional point of the communication was that we knew that we had our program in place, and so that we knew we had our cost sharing. Initially, we didn't know how the financials were going to break down. Obviously, as has been mentioned by other speakers today, you're going in people's homes, you're going on people's property. So we had to coordinate with legal to get a release and an easement. And then that also included the repayment option, whether they wanted to make a lump sum payment or utilize the payment plan. The state law required that the notice, there was a specific notice that was provided in 9 different languages. We expanded that number of languages to facilitate additional languages that were not required by the state law, but that were heavily spoken in Skokie. In doing that, we utilized an internal list of employees' spoken languages so that we could provide that required notice in those additional languages without needing to utilize a translating service or paying a consultant to do that. As has been common here, communication is key. Start as early as you can. Don't be afraid to send the letters, make the phone calls, knock on the doors. This year's project, because of this increased coordination and because of the increased scope of work with the water service replacement, we added a second inspector to our team, and that was very beneficial in both facilitating the project, but also in determining service material types. Having those extra eyes and boots on the ground were very beneficial. And then even once construction started, our contractor was an excellent resource too. I mean, as you can imagine, there's a line item in the contract, right? So they want to replace as many services as they can. At the end of the day, I think it was a resounding success, and we're very proud to report those results, and I'm happy to discuss it with anybody that's interested. Back to you, Rachel.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Russ. I absolutely love how you guys came up with more languages to include and how to translate that. That is a very innovative, creative way to handle that. It's a great idea. Could you, did you guys have any pushback for the ordinance? not the ordinance, the resolution, sorry, that you guys passed? Was there any pushback from elected officials or even residents about that?
Not really, and I wouldn't call it pushback. The only concerns we received were from people that had already replaced their lead service. And so now the program wasn't in place at that time. They were not eligible for the cost share. And that was the only concern we had, and those were very minimal. I think the elected officials were very, very supportive of staff's recommendation, and obviously we had great results with the program. And so I think it kind of speaks for itself.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thanks to all of our panelists so far. We're going to bring everybody back for questions. If we can go to our next, I think we have one more slide. Please add your questions to the Q&A button right below, right in the middle of your screen. There should be a Q&A button, and you can add your questions in there. Dante, I'm going to start with you and ask a question, if that's all right. Could you share a little bit about which customers or vulnerable populations that you guys prioritize with your first replacements?
Yeah, as was mentioned, and some by the other panelists, is that we took a look at some of the other census data that we had related to, medium income household was likely to have young children in there, and prioritize those areas for phase one of the project area. And so, leaning with that information, we took a look at a subdivision here in the village of Hazel Crest, where they had based on a predictive analysis, they had a large amount of likely lead service line, overlapping that data with some of the census medium income data that was referenced by Chris and Jonathan, and used that as a target to identify where we first wanted to go with the lead service line replacement.
Thank you. Russ, we have another question for you. You mentioned the free lead service line replacement program actually had a lower opt-in rate than the cost share program that came later. Why do you think that is? Do you think it has anything to do with the funding mechanism there, or just timing? Any ideas?
So I don't know, but what I've always suspected is that it was a function of the impacted residents' ability to work that coordination with the plumber into their schedule and allowing those people into their homes, but then also maybe a function of that was through the water commission that was running the pipe through town, as opposed to the communication actually coming from the village ourselves and our own project. But like I said, I don't know, but that's what I've always suspected.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks for answering that. Do we have Jonathan and Chris still here? We have another question for you guys. What challenges might municipalities face in pulling the data together to create a vulnerability index? And what resources might be available to help assist them to do that? I know, Jonathan, you mentioned that there's technical assistance opportunities. Could you maybe share a little bit more about that?
Sure. We were just at a seminar through South Suburban Mayors and Managers where the bipartisan infrastructure law has designated groups and nonprofit organizations that are receiving funding to do technical assistance work underneath the law. So the two big ones are the Great Lakes, I forgot what it's called, GLAC, and then the Delta Institute. So there are others too. And if you want to search for it or get in touch with me, we could call that out. But they have money to come in and help out with things like this. And I know Chris has a lot of expertise too in actually accessing the data, so he might want to weigh in on the first part of that question.
Sure. I would say there's, and I'm also happy to kind of follow up on anyone who wants more resources on this, but I think there's a lot of really helpful online resources out there. or like online tools and databases, which kind of just teaches you how to download data from the census website, right? How to pull data for your specific community or your specific census tract or block group. So I think there's a lot of resources online that would make this work slightly easier, right? I think there's still a little bit of technical skills, right? Like how to clean data in a spreadsheet, how to download data from census website. So sort of some basic data collecting and cleaning abilities required, but I would say a lot of resources out there for sure.
Rachel, if I could just add to that too, I think one of the most important pieces of data is just the age of the homes. I know Jonathan and Chris probably can tell you specifically, but was it when was lead service line use materials outlawed?
They were outlawed in 1986.
Yeah, so you know, it's use that as the date of demarcation will go a long way in helping to identify where it's likely you may have lead service lines and not.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have a question kind of for the whole group. Anyone can kind of jump in and answer this one, but we'd love to hear if you have any lessons learned from community outreach that you could speak to in terms of how to establish trust, especially as we're talking about working in people's homes, working on their property. What have we learned to be the most effective way to work alongside residents as we are entering onto private property?
I'll start with that one. I think it helps to have community organizations get involved. You know, whether that's a church group or a homeowners association or someone else who's connected with the community who can do outreach that doesn't sound like it's coming from the government or a engineering firm, you know, a for-profit entity. I think that helps a lot to get people on board. I think once they get in the door, you know, we've had some open houses. I think Dante mentioned that we had 70 people at one of the open houses. We got about 55 signed access agreements from that one open house. So once they start the process and they hear everything about it, it gets a little bit easier. But to get that first contact and to get them interested, I think that would be better served by a member of the community who they know. And then a follow-up to that is once the projects start going, whether that's an inventory and they see digging in the yard, they see door knocking and inspections and things like that, or it's a full replacement project, the response rates increase. So I think there's, like Dante said, a little bit of positive peer pressure there. And also just it legitimizes the whole process that this is happening. It's real. Hey, I better get on board.
Yeah, I would say as well, in addition to the communication aspect early and often and various types that's been highlighted, we required the services to be directionally drilled into the home. And so therefore there was no disturbance on the resident's property. So there'd be a pit at the main, there'd be a pit at the B box, but then no excavation per plan on the resident's property. Now, did that always go as planned? Maybe not, but at least that was the intent going into it. And to circle back to the other question I was asked about the free program, that might have played into that as well. The fact that at that time, the services were being open cut into the home and up to the meter. And then also on that, at that time, the state didn't require the lead being replaced on private property. So I think that's probably an additional aspect that honestly just occurred to me sitting here.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I can see how that would make a big difference for residents. The next question we have from our audience is how to kind of measure where your community stands on this issue. How do we gauge where residents are at on lead and water issues in order to properly begin engagement with water management offices and elected officials?
For Skokie, I would say it was positive. I mean, I was I was happy to hear reports from our inspection team that it became a talking point for residents when we were doing the project. They would congregate in their yards and talk about, oh yeah, you should see what they did. It's so clean, it's nice. Now I got the copper. And then they get excited about the next day or the following day when we were proceeding down the street and we'd be getting to their home.
I think also, we here at Hazel Crest, going back to 2018, we've been trying to get surveys out to residents, trying to get their assistance with trying to, take pictures so we can help identify the material of their service line on the private side, and continue to talk about it. How many surveys? We probably sent out 3 different attempts at surveys, just trying to get enough responses. So to try to firm up some of the predictive analysis data that we have. So I guess being persistent, continuing to talk about it until you start to allow it to create a buzz on its own as well.
There's
Yeah,
some
it's such a unique opportunity with such a visible project to have that buzz in the community. Sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
I was going to say there's some EPA required outreach stuff that's going to be implemented soon. Your inventory needs to be publicly available. Your replacement plan needs to be publicly available. If you're starting a project, you need to mail out before you start the project to notify the community about what's going on. You need to notify everyone in the community that has a lead service line within 15 days of discovering it. So I think as we move forward here and more communities start engaging in this work, it's going to be a little bit more grassroots of people gaining knowledge and becoming involved.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see if y'all think that these lead service line replacement projects will fundamentally change the future of how utilities are interacting with communities, especially as we're seeing more and more that some of this outreach is becoming required. And one of the things we talked about earlier was just like needing to be proactive. Like we're now reaching out as water utilities to residents outside of those moments of crisis, and trying to be more proactive. Do we think this is a big shift in communications for utilities that's going to last, or is it just going to stick to these programs?
Well, I think in public government, local municipal government, it's always positive to be proactive, and as one of the earlier panelists stated, to be brutally honest. In our roles, there's always going to be some little bit of untrust with government that you're going to have to overcome. So the more you are consistent in your communication, upfront with your communication, and put the facts out there to residents, that's how you will continue to build trust with them. And that, your priority is delivering quality services to them through their local government. So being consistent with that, being as transparent as possible is what's going to be key in this project or any service that we provide to residents.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Well, thank you all. We are just about the end of our panel here. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to share your perspectives and experience. At the end of the day, I think we can all agree the cornerstone of any successful public works endeavor is trust. Building and maintaining community trust through transparent communication is essential to securing that widespread support and engagement. And with intentional outreach and communication, we can seek to foster a deeper connection between municipal leaders and residents that creates this sense of shared responsibility for our water supply. If you have any other further questions about lead service line communication outreach, feel free to contact me. They're going to put my contact information in the chat, and I'm sure any of the other panelists would be happy to share more. We appreciate all of you taking the time to share this information today. Please reach out to Sheila at MPC. I think her contact info is also in the chat if you want any more information on the topics today. And now I'll turn the mic back over to her. Thank you all.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to some sort of bad water pun that I'm sure I'm coming up to at the end here. And really, really sincere appreciation to all of our panelists today, both the folks at the top of the hour, Mayor Brawley, Mayor Thompson, Allison Swisher, Jeannie Kruger, and our current panelists on the lead service line replacement side, Dante Sawyer from Hazel Crest and Russ Rietveld from Skokie, as well as Chris Tiongson from MPC, my colleague, and also Jonathan Flowers. We really appreciate your time. We are going to launch a poll, and if you could just let us know what you learned today. How was this helpful? You can also add to the chat or the Q&A if you'd like, just letting us know if there's anything we didn't answer or you want to hear more about. We want to know how we did today. And we really just greatly appreciate this opportunity. So in the final minutes remaining, I'm gonna leave the poll open just to see if we can get a few more participants there. And I'm going to also talk about our final in-person event. We're so very, very excited to have this event, this Full Drinking Water Academy in 2023. And we're very grateful to our sponsor, Arcadis, for helping us launch this event. Right now, we have just completed session 2 of our 3-part event. And on December 7th we will have our 3rd event. And that will go from 9 a.m. to noon. There'll be refreshments. There will be the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, both folks from the SRF funding side, as well as folks from the compliance side, to talk through case studies with folks. This event is for elected municipal officials, trustees, mayors, village presidents, directors of public works, and others who are in the responsibility phase of drinking water management for their municipalities. It is a targeted event and it's reserved for municipal officials. We are really excited to have folks in the room. So we'll have folks from also the Illinois section of the American Water Works Association to talk about their public and water ambassador program. We'll have experts from Elevate who have helped us moderate our first 2 panels to share more information, as well as some of the technical assistance that they provide. And they'll all be there. We'll work through case studies together. It's just a very exciting time, and it'll be a really great event. Again, the registration is limited and our capacity for that is limited. So if you know you have someone on your staff or a trustee, an elected official who you think might benefit from coming and being engaged with some of the fine folks who will be at this event. So we'll have, again, Gary from the Illinois Protection Agency and Nidan Singh. Both Gary and Nidan, I feel like are old friends now. They're going to be talking about the SRF funding side of things. Adam Nutt will talk about compliance issues. Drew Williams-Clark from Cook County's Build Up Cook program will be here to talk about technical assistance they're doing to support Cook County municipalities. We'll have folks from Elevate, as I mentioned before. Dave Cohn will be there to talk about the Chicago Department of Water Management's rollout of their cost of service methodology for their water rates for their wholesale customers, as well as the new governing body that they've created to help support that will have members of the customer base actually be a part of that, and that is at the municipal level. We'll have Darnell Johnson, who will talk about about C4 and the work of the Urban Efficiency Group as they've done climate resilience work, and maybe we can talk there about, is there a place for an aggregator and a support for water in the same way that they've done climate resiliency support across municipalities with Mayor Thompson, as she described earlier today. Deborah Carroll from UIC's Government Finance Research Center and Laura Medwood will also be there to talk about a report that was spurred from funding from Representative LaPointe on what we know about water rates and billing in the Illinois region. They've currently been focused, this report was commissioned during the pandemic. It is out now. we'll have experts there who kind of talk through that report, but also give best practices there. And you can be there in the room in a breakout session with these experts talking about how to apply these to your municipality. So we are so very excited for the time that we've had together today. It looks like for the poll, we do have some good news to report that we got our learning objectives met. So I'm excited to see that. And I just want to be sure to thank my colleagues here at MPC who are invisible in the background. And that would be Hugo and Morgan. Just a quick shout out online to appreciate the work that's gone into producing this event today. I thank all of our panelists and Rachel from Elevate, who did a great job as a moderator and content provider. We look forward to seeing folks on December 7th, and please, please, please make sure that you register or pass that information on to an elected official or trustee, mayor in a community that might be able to benefit from that event and its attendance. Thank you so much. This event has had a smooth flow, and we're just grateful to be on this ship together, swimming, rowing, moving in the right direction, we hope. Thank you so much.